Kumlen and Avlat Gemara. Morning today is Daf Tezvav. We are learning the Sechta Avodah Zarah, and we are up to 7 lines from the top. We're talking about that if we're talking about the chash of bestiality, because goyim also have the Shem Mizbenes is recorded, is also morality, and bestiality is forbidden. So we said that when it comes to small animals, some places had a custom you do sell it, some places had a custom you don't sell it, and but definitely in the paddock, so we can't leave it in the bar. We can't leave an animal on its own, because yichud in those days, back then, when it was so rife, it was forbidden for them as well.
That's the standard behavior, what you expect.
Exactly. And the reason why you permitted to sell them a small animal according to those places you can is because he's not going to damage his own animal. Why would he damage his own animal? But nevertheless, you're not allowed to sell them large animals and calves and foal, donkeys, young donkeys. And the question is, why not? What's wrong with selling them large animals? We just said before that it's their own animals; they're not going to do anything wrong to it. Okay, 5 lines, 6 lines, top of the page. Everywhere, my time, but why not? So we say, you know what? True, we're not concerned about bestiality of their own animal. We are worried that they can do a malacha on Shabbos. We are worried that they're going to do a malacha on Shabbos itself. Now the question is, what's wrong? You sold them an animal. This. So you're going to ask an Evid. Who cares? Kiva dezovna kanya. Once you sold it to them, it belongs to them. They can do whatever they want. You don't have a mitzvah that the animal, the rest of its life, is not allowed to work on Shabbos. So the Gemara Gzeda, it comes in the Chachamim and made a special decree. Mishum sha'ala, next time you will lend him an animal, or Mishum shchida, next time you will rent him an animal, ultimately it's your animal. And if the guy uses them on Shabbos, you're going to be liable. It's still your animal working on Shabbos. That's so a goy. Now it's not Avodah Zarah. This is any goy. Go work with your animal on Shabbos. So next time you're going to lend. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. What are you worried about if I lend or if I rent? So what? But at the time, while they're borrowing or while they're renting, it's theirs. That's why they're responsible for any actions happening. So if they work on Shabbos, what's the big deal? What's wrong? So the Gemara asks, Shaila Kanya, Agra Kanya, aren't they koined? You know what we're worried about? We're worried about Mishum Nisyoni. We're worried about like a minute before Shabbos, he's going to buy the animal, and then he wants to test the animal to make sure the animal does perform. So therefore he's going to load the animal up with a bunch of items, and he'll say to the balabas, let's see, walk with the animal, see how it manages carrying heavy loads. So and on Shabbos you'll be walking with the animal. And it's called mechamer. Mechamer is if you lead an animal that is actually carrying things, it's mechamer. The zimri zolo nelo samlo shkid chamer. He might buy it a minute for Shabbos. The mala Shabbat, the Erev Shabbos. V'amale ton nesaya. The word nesaya is from testing it. Let's give a test run. Nele it v'shama leila kole. Now, even though you might not touch it, you might not lead it. You just say you'll call your bull by your pet name or your cow by your pet name and say move. And the animal moves because of your voice. You're liable for mechamer. V'ozam machmas it goes because you. The tazel, and you're happy for the animal to move, because otherwise the guy will say, take the animal back. It doesn't work. You're mechayev, and some people are not goyers because there's a machlekes or Shabbos where the mechamer. Knows mechamer is forbidden on Shabbos to have your animal doing work on Shabbos, carrying things on Shabbos, but mechamer is different than the 39 malachas. So some say it's only awesome at Torah, you don't bring a chatas. Some say you still bring a chatas, but definitely you don't get killed for it. And the problem is you'll be mechamer. So Taiz in order to train him ask, forget about mechamer. What about the fact that your animal has to rest? Shris is behemtei. So Rashi says that mechamer, Shris is behemtei. There's machlek big rachek is Rashi and the Rambam. As the Mishnah Melech explains, the Rambam holds that if your animal carries things on Shabbos, it is only an Isser Asay in the Torah. So Mashenk and Mechamer is an Isser Lav. A Lav is strict, and that's why the Gemara talks about the Isser Mechamer rather than resting an animal. Other Rashi holds that no, that Mechamer is a Lav. Rashi is clearly right over here that Mechamer is a Loisasa, Loisasa Kamalacha. You ever and all that. So and your animal, your family. So it's a lav, but mechamer could be the chatas. Tosis, who asked the question, seems to learn that they're both exactly the same. That Mechamer and Shishas Behemtoi are both alav; they're equal. So the question is, why mention Mechamer? Talk about Shishas Behemtoi. So therefore, Tosis says, if Shishas Behemtoi itself, they would not have Asad made a Gezeda, because the whole thing is, because 1 minute, it's only the beginning of Shabbos. Once Shabbos starts, you sold it already. Either the deal happened or didn't happen. So there's nothing to worry about. It's only the 1 minute into Shabbos. So therefore, by saying and lending or renting the entire Shabbos is a problem. That's also. So they wouldn't have made an Issa. If they wouldn't have made an Issa for Shvis's Behemta, if not for the fact that Mechamer, which is stricter. So Tesis also says Mechamer is stricter, but doesn't spell out how it's stricter. Is it because it's a lav versus Asay, or is it because of Chatzas versus a lav? Then the Gemara says, your premise is, I don't know what the problem is. He says, your premise is entirely wrong. Your question was that if you rent it, it belongs to that person. It belongs to that person, at least the renting. It belongs to that person. It's no longer my responsibility. He said, that premise is totally wrong. Even when you rent something, you're the ultimate owner. And the Adinim is still involved. And I'll prove it to you. And therefore, because you're the owner, and therefore you're very worried that you rent him an animal on Shabbos and he's using it, you're chayiv. Yeah, and how do I know? But when we say Schidas is Kanya, who has to search for Chametz on Pesach? The Seicher, because he's living there. So the Chayda is Schidas Kanya. With Schidas make Kanya, Schidas is Kanya. But Kanya, we learned even in a place. And so we're talking now about the idea of Schidas. We had a similar Gemara in Pesachim, where they come to a different conclusion and some other Gemaras, but that's another matter. So the Gemara says that you're telling me Schidas is kind that the Seicher is now the total owner. That's a question. It said Abba Mokum Shamru Lahaski. We'll still learn the Gemara. Even in a place where you say you're allowed to rent, the Chutzlaritz, you're allowed to you're allowed to rent to a guy loyal base dinam, but we're not talking about renting it that he can actually live in this house. You know why not? If he's an idol worshiper, he'll bring idols into the house. Who cares? If he's a renter, he's a tenant, and he now is the owner of that house, of that property. So who cares what he brings in the house? Why is it my responsibility? Says the Gemara.
His responsibility. The renter.
He has to give it back. So that's why he's responsible.
Your animal, I have to take care of.
Yeah, that's why. The more you have ownership over it, the more. If I have no ownership over it, then I'm only a chayiv for negligence. Because I have a certain ownership over it, I take more responsibilities as well. So what do you call it? In Etzisol, you're not allowed to rent houses to Gramos. We'll learn later on that. But in Chutzlart, you're permitted to rent. And they were saying, but even though permitted to rent, if it's an idol worshiper, not for a dwelling, because they're bringing in Avodah Zarah. Now, who cares? These are that you tell me that the Soich of the tenant owns the property. When he brings it into the house, it's his own house. So what's the problem? So the Gemara, shiny avoiders kachavim. No, you're right. Normally, we generally say that the Soich is in control. But because the Torah makes a special issa, the Chamida by Avodah Zarah, it says like Sovi to'evel beisecha. It's like by your own, by a motzei. You're not allowed to even have it in your house. It is beisecha ultimately. Therefore, that's an exception. But otherwise, I would say Schiras is not koine. I would say normally I would say Schiras is koine, and because generally speaking we say that Schiras is koine, and therefore we that's why we had a question. Why is it also why is it a problem of lending or renting to go? You say no, so because you might lend, you might rent, and you had to come up with a new Isser of Nisyayin. A minute of Shabbos will ask you to test the animal, and then you'll be over the Isser of Mechamer, of walking with your animal and with your voice making it walk even, and is carrying things. It's Mechamer, which we said either according to Rambam's and Asay, according to Rashi is allowed, and according to one opinion of Gemara is a Chatzis as well. So Rabbi continues asking a question. Is Schiras mikanya? So your premise was that Schiras is kind. I'm telling you that Schiras for tenant does not really own the property; it still belongs to the landlord, and therefore we are worried. Don't sell large animals to a guy because next time you will lend and you will rent. And renting, it's your problem if the guy works within a Shabbos. Nothing to do with Avodah Zarah, any guy. But now, and I'll prove it to you. We learned Yisrael for each Sochar part of Mekoyin for each rented a part cow from Mekoyin Yachilena. You can feed it Karshine Truma. You can feed it seeds of Truma. You can feed it seeds of Truma. Rashi says, how do you get in Truma? Either because your grandfather was a Kohen and your mother's father, Or you have a right to give the truma to anybody you want. And if I don't give it to any particular kohen, it's a moment she'ain like tovin. There's nobody who has a right to come and say to you, "Hey, where's the truma you're supposed to give?" Because I don't give it to you. I can give it to any other kohen. The kohen that owns the animal is very, very happy for you to give the kashinim to his own animal, and you're feeding him so nicely, and the animal gets fattened up. So therefore, it's as if the kohen received it and gave it back to you, and that's why there's no problem Yisrael giving it. That's how Rashi learns. Other Rishonim say it's talking about that the kohen gave him kashir truma to give to the animal. The responsibility of eating here belongs to the kohen. So therefore, we bring no proof from this first part of the Mishnah. It's the second part. The second part is the kohen shesacha par Yisrael. The kohen hires an animal for Yisrael. Even though the kohen is responsible to feed the animal, lo yachilena kashir truma. You know why? He's not allowed to feed it this animal for. Seed. You know why? Because it belongs to the eat. The Kohen rented it. Doesn't that prove that even though the Kohen rented it, still belongs to the Balabas, to the Yid? These are the Kohen. Why should you eat it? Part of it, his animal is a raya that this is not Kohen. So the fact that we bring a raya from the second part of the Rashi, everyone tries to understand Rashi. Wait, Rashi, I just told you, why didn't we bring a raya from the first part of the Rashi? So the Yid has a right to give him truma. Others say it's not right because you can have hana from truma. You have hana from truma. He's not eating it. You're not allowed to eat truma, but hana you can. So therefore, it doesn't really prove anything. Ella. Shmam is chidas like kanya. So we conclude in this gemara is chidas not kanya. The Rishonim already talk about other gemaras where it seems chidas is kanya. Each one of those other gemaras is an exception. Like Taisa brings the gemara about cheating. Over there, we say that chidas has been like ownership of karka is or whether it's a no or not. So again, it says that only regarding a no, because it says extra word simker, an extra word selling, which includes chiras as well. Says now the Gemara concludes. Now that we decided that chiras is not kohen, so actually, even though you rented the house to a guy, you still belongs to the owner of the yid. That's why you can't sell an animal. Same with an animal. You can't sell an animal to a guy because if next time you will rent to a guy, it's your animal, and you'll be over for shvisas behemta. Your animal's not resting a Shabbos. So three possible gzeiras. That's why we include them all. And that your animal is working on Shabbos. I told you, machlek is a shvisas behemta Shabbos. According to Rambam's only nasei. According to Rashi, clearly here in the Gemara, it is a loisese just as well. Interesting. One of the Tesis question is why he says Mechama and not Shvisas Behemta. One of the Chachamim answers correctly. The Pri Megaber has a whole Chakira if women are liable for Mechama, because Mechama might be a mitzvah say Shazman Grama and it's not included in the Zoch of Shama. And because the women would not be chayv if we would have said that the Easter, sorry, the other way around. The Isa Shvisas Behemta is an assay. If you know Shvisas Behemta is an assay, it's not in the Zocher of Shomer. Zocher is Kiddush, and the Shomer is all the Leisasa. Shvisas Behemta would not be included, and a woman does not have the Isa Shvisas Behemta. It will come out that by women is a lot of sell. If the whole Gzeid is because it might work, you lend and rent it on Shabbos and work with it on Shabbos, so a woman has no problem because Shvisas Behemta.
Because it's only also on Shabbos there for you saying it's
because only mitzvah say, yeah, it's mangrama. It's not part of the equation. That's why we throw in also mechame, which is a lav, and that is included. Second further, Rabada shows Rabada said you're allowed to sell a donkey through a mekla, through a broker. Why through a broker you're allowed to? Because what are we worried about? Remember, we have three gzeiros: the siyona, shaila, schilis. Imishum the siyona broker. What are you worried about? That the owner will say, "Hey, wait, let me call out the animal, see if it works." The animal does not recognize the voice of the broker, and therefore it's not shaykh. Those are machmas that should walk for because of them. So the siyona is not applicable. The imishum shaila schilis. He might lend, he might rent. Now, a broker has only one interest in mind: to sell. He's scared that if he lends the animal and the owner will get to familiarize with the animals, will find that the animal's not perfect, it has this flaw and that flaw. He only sells. So you have only a short window. To change your mind. Except all those dinim you learn that if it's a mum that you could have told him, you should have told him, and he finds out later and he couldn't have known straight away. But otherwise, he doesn't want that the person to test the animal for too long, because usually you'll find some fault somewhere. So therefore, he'll never happen that he will lend or rent. We keep him like today. He was not his. Number one is he's not his to lend or rent. Number two, why should doesn't want the guy to become aware of his defects. So a mekla is different. A broker is different. Rabhuda Zabin Abu Potter Rabhuda once sold a Potter to a guy. We just learned in the Mishnah, you're not allowed to sell a behema gasa to a guy. And Rabhuda did. I'm going to my time of Marhachi. Why'd you do that? I'm like, because he says, because I don't know what he bought it for. Did he buy it to work with, and therefore it's a problem because of Shabbos? We're not worried about bestiality because he buys it. He's not going to ruin his own animal. So are we worried about the work on Shabbos? No, because I'm sure he did it for shchita. The Mishnah says he's not allowed to. The Mishnah is talking about animals that people don't shech, behemoth tmeya, as Rashi says. Or other Shem have different shechim. So behemoth tmeya, an animal generally didn't shech, donkeys and horses. They use it for work. So therefore it's a problem. I sold it a cow. A cow, we'll probably use it for shchita. Then the Gemara, do not how do you know that you don't know which way it's going to go? We're lenient. So the Gemara did not. We learned in the Mishnah, the Shammai says, you're not allowed to sell up to a person that you suspect is going to work on Shemitah. You're not allowed to sell them an animal that plows. So the scared that you're going to use your animal, you're able to live. And Basil is matter. Why? True, he might work with it, but also he might check it. So we see from it clearly, by Lifnei Iver, we always go to have a tendency to be lenient and down the cow's chus and say, there's another possibility here besides the Isser, the Heter, and therefore it's all right. Omar, Rav, or Rab, they say, me, Dumbi, how can you compare? Harsam over there ain't Adam B'Tzuva, Auschwitz is Behemta B'Shviz. Over there, all it is Lifnei Iver. There's no issa for your animal your animal has to rest in the Shemitah. You don't say that at all.
Still carry wagons.
Yeah, we do everything. You can work also. The only problem is that you have an issa. You have an issa to go plow. You, the person, and here the issa is that you're helping another yidi so chashuv to do issa on Shemitah. So therefore, over there we are going to therefore we're making. Over Hacha, he's asking him. Over here, Mitzuva Ashvis is to Shabbos. It's not a question of Lifnei Iver. Your animal is working on Shabbos. So how can you be Rabbi be makel over here? Where do you know that there's a suffix here? He might work with the animal, Isa the Raisa. He might not work with the animal, and how you know you can be lenient. Over there's only an Isa Lifnei Iver. There's no Isa whatever the animal is doing. Lifnei Iver is much more like it's like a step away from the Aveda. So therefore, if there's a suffix, we'll go even more lenient. Says the Gemara. Abaye. So Abaye said to Rabbi Huna's Svaris, that we told you the whole time the Chakir is Rabbi Huna's Svaris, that Lifnei Iver is whatever Aveda is doing, that's what you have a chelik in. So what's the chelik Lifnei Iver? Or the animals mitzvah to rest. It's to say your Lifnei Iver is not a separate Aveda. Whatever the Aveda is, that's what you're part of. So for you, it's usher. Plow, because you're the one plowing. When you do Lifnei Iver and a guy is plowing a Shemitah with your animal, what Aveda are you doing? You're plowing on Shemitah. So what's the difference? And if we make over there, we'll make over here. It's the Rabba here, or Rabba. They say no. They say that Lifnei Iver is a separate Aveda, and it's a step away from the Aveda itself. So therefore, over there, where you could be makel, you could be lenient and say maybe he's using a shchita, will be lenient. So now Baya and Rav Ashi both ask a question, two opposite questions, to Rav or to Rabba. Baya said to him, so you're telling me, but if it would have been a direct Aveda to the person, not to the neighbor, it's also. But he saw when it comes to your field, definitely you have a nisa for your field to be plowed and everything else, right? It's your field. But he saw the other you have to have your field lying fallow in the year Shmita, and yet with now we learn Beishamai said like you could Adam southern near Bishvis. You're not allowed to learn a plowed field. You're not allowed to sell a plowed field on the year Shmita, but Basil's matter. Your field over here is going to be plowed. Why is he matter? Because maybe they'll not leave it follow. Who says he's going to work in it? Now the choyda, this is mamash nisa in the field, and there's Lifnei Iver over here, and not problem. Masker all the way around. The cholhecha, and you tell me that wherever the ain't other mitzvah, a person has no direct isa, shadi, you permit it, right? But like you said, Lifnei Iver only will be lenient. Nobody kalim. Let's say using your utensils. There's definitely no mitzvah shvisa on your utensils on Shemitah. They know the mitzvah shvisa kalim shvisa. There's no mitzvah that your kalim have to rest. Just like on Shabbos, you had a machlekes b'Shabbos, so first Pesach and Shabbos. Whether there's a mitzvah called shvisa's kalim. In fact, we ask over there, how can you light candles on Shabbos? It's in a keli, and according to Bishama, you came have to be shvisa, and then you have to be mafkedit, and all that Tesa says. So it's what you call it. So there's no chi for your kelim to rest in the year Shemitah. That's now, and we learned. Elu and kelim she'enu shalom you're not allowed to sell them Shemitah because of the either. Hamachrisha, the plow, the chokila, and all of its utensils, the oil, the yoke, a mizra, and the thing you use to toss it up in the air to for winnowing, the hadeka and a rake. Elo Ravashi. So Ravashi says. So the rule is as follows: Kol heicha the equal mitla tulinen. If it's plausible that he's not going to do an Isa with it, then we'll be lenient. And I don't care. I forgot the mitzvah. I don't give a mitzvah. But whatever you cannot, it's quite obvious. For example, the kalim. What's he buying the kalim a year early? The land he's buying a year early. There's a deal. You can't buy land every day. You want to buy land. It came available. Okay, taka is a year shmita, but I won't work with it. So why are you buying it now? Because it's available. When it comes to buying the tools that you need to plow a field with, why are you buying it now? Wait next year. So there's a good ground for chad that the person is going to use in a shmita, therefore it's also. So whatever we can interpret that in a mutzah way, but if you can't, you can't. That is irrelevant. It's a question only whether you can be lenient, be meko, and assume that they're doing a het with it or not. Says the Gemara. Rabba Zabin Hamli Yisrael, Rabba once sold a donkey to a yid. Rabba once sold a donkey to a yid that we were choshed that he was going to sell to a guy. And we just said before, you're not allowed to sell to a guy because next time you're going to land, you're going to rent, or you can use the siyana. And Rabba once sold it to a yid that's choshed that he will sell to a guy. Amalei Abai said to him, "My time of Marachi, why did you do that?" Amalei Anali sold to a yid. I sold to Yid. Yeah, but the problem is that this Yid is going to sell it to a guy. So the so Rabbi asked the back. What we could be totally lenient, totally chumr. If you sell it to a guy, the guy will work on a Shabbos. But maybe we'll sell it to a Yid, and we'll sell it to you. What's the problem? Now that is the problem. A minute ago, Rabbi said that it doesn't make a difference, and here Rabbi says. Oh, if we could be before Rabbi argued about well, how do you know to go on the lenient side? And here Rabbi says, oh, we have two choices. We'll start to go. I'm going to be lenient. But because of that, they decided to be goydus before, not Rabbi, but Rabbi, because he's contradicting himself unless he changes his mind. So ask a question. I'll ask a question. In a place where the minig is, you can sell small behemoths to kusim, not goyim, but to kusim. Like these are the Eden that were questionable, controversial, whether they were propagated, not propagated, but definitely later on. And we actually had in the second page that any mitzvah that took out of Shimon said, any mitzvah that took upon themselves that were frumer, then the Eid was. But a lot of mitzvahs they didn't believe it. They didn't believe in Chachamim. And Lifnei was no big deal for them. So if you're in a place where the minig is, you can sell to kusim. The moichin can sell, and shalolim the minig is that you don't sell to kusim. Ein moichin don't sell. My time. But behema daka we're worried about bestiality. Behema gasa we're worried about Shabbat, working on Shabbos. Behema daka we're worried about bestiality, which in those days was rife. If you remember later on the Gemara, later on that a goy would rather have bestiality with a Yiddish animal than with his own wife. That's how prevalent it was in those days. We can't begin to understand it, but that's how it was. It was a very depraved society. My time, why? If the meaning is that you don't sell to a kusim, you don't sell. Now, why not? What are we worried about? If we're worried about bestiality, kusim, we're not. It's only goyim. By kusim, we never will choshe them. I'll prove it to you. Time we learn. You're not allowed to bring a behemoth inside the bars, the taverns by a goy. There's a chodim, there's a male only tavern. You shouldn't bring male animals there because they do bestiality even with a male animal. Then the caves, in the caves, and nor can you bring in the caves next to goyish women who are in the caves. Why? Because a lot of men hang around where the women hang around, and sometimes the woman's not available, will go to the animal. So therefore, you shouldn't have the caves next to it. Ain't sort of in the caves in the should not have female animals where the males are, and it was a chaylik or male animals with the women, all because of bestiality. But it's all by goyim. They might say, you don't give it to the shepherd for the same reason. Nor do you allow them to be alone with these animals. Nor do you give over your kid to teach them learning, because we're scared that they're going to. And now Rashi brings a few interesting things, and one of them bothers me. I'll tell you in a minute why. One is Rashi, the first Rashi says, we're worried that he's going to plant apocryphis in the mind of your vulnerable child, impressionable child. And also we're worried about Mishkav Zachar, and in other places they're trying to say, because we're worried he'll kill him. Because, like, I'll go along to a barber. Yeah, but it doesn't say that about Lam to Sefer. Or the Lam de Umnis, or teach him a trade. And you shouldn't be alone, because you might, teach him apocryphis. Aval Mamidin Behema, you're allowed to bring a behemoth but put to go shall kusin. By kusin is not a problem. Schadi made the cave, Schadi made the cave, but we're not worried. Why? Because they're not into bestiality. Umaisin behemoth l'roishalan, you're allowed to give it to their shepherd as well. And but we're not worried about bestiality. And you're allowed to leave them alone. You're allowed to give them a kid to Malamed Sefer. Now this part I don't understand. Okay, we're not worried about that they're going to murder the child, and we're not worried about Mishkav Zachar, but why aren't we worried about Minas? The first reason that Rashi gives why you shouldn't give it to a Goyish teacher is because they're going to teach him apocryphis. And a Kusim who don't believe in the Chachamim is the same thing. So why are you allowed to? I don't know. I was looking up trying to find a hezbollah why you're allowed to. I don't know. Well, the Lamda Umnas, you're allowed to teach a trade. Clearly not chashud. So why is there meaning in some places you don't sell turkusim? That's number one. Yeah, but must be the reason why you cannot sell the kusi because he might sell it to a guy. Simple as that. Well, every time we learn, you're not selling weapons like Klezai, you're not selling to a guy weapons or Klezai, any tools or weapons. But you're not allowed to shopping for them their weapons. Then you're not allowed to sell them. These are the buckles you put around the prisoners' feet. And what you put around their necks. Kavlaim, I guess, are manacles. Metal chains. Echad Ebegachavim, the Echad Kusi, not a goy and not a kusi either. Now located my time, but why kusi not? What are you worried about? Are we worried that they're going to use it to kill Yidden? We're not worried when it comes to kusi. How many you said before me? If we want to be alone with them. What are we worried about? That they'll answer to a guy. So what are you telling me that he only sold to guy, won't sell to Yidden? So you make clearly here that when we are worried that they might sell to guy, it's a concern. Remember, before he was selling it to a Yid, and the question is, who is he going to answer to? If you sell it to a Yid, even a Yisrael Chashud, he can always do tshuva. And you're always hopeful that a Yid will do tshuva. That's why the Yid's Avodah Zarah is not considered Avodah Zarah until he actually uses it for Avodah Zarah, because he can always do tshuva. So therefore, over here we're talking about a goy or a kusi. The probability is also to another guy. But when it comes the animal to a guy and work in shops. But when it comes to and so on, then the next time you lend your rent. But when it comes to a yid, even though he's a sol chashud, you can do tshuva. That's what the difference is. Just like they say, kach is the same thing. So therefore, when we don't think leniently, oh, he'll probably sell it to a yid. No, he might sell it to a guy, and you're not allowed. If you're not sell it to a guy, you might sell it to a guy, or to a Yisrael Chashid who might sell it to a guy as well. Rohit Basrei, so Rabbi realized his mistake. He chased after him plus a parsi. He ran 12 kilometers to catch up with this guy. Ikadamri parsa, or even only one, it was only 4 kilometers, but bars through the sand. Your feet sinks into the sand. You know how difficult it is. Loy Adichay couldn't catch up with him. He realized his mistake and he tried to get it back. Even though Hooking said Rabbanon, he nevertheless he tried to get it back. The Tracy already asked him. I told you I mentioned last time, but this is the Tracy here. He wants to know why is it you're not allowed to sell it to a guy because he might unsell it to a guy. When we said before, there's no lifnei. We said lifnei even exists, but now lifnei. So what do you sell it to a guy? You might unsell it to a guy. I mean, what's the problem? Yeah. So he said that this is what Taisa makes these say. There's a hold. Since a guy does not have the Easter of Leaf Naiver, let's say the best out there, guy does not have the Easter of Naiver. So when you sell it to the guy, there's no Leaf Naiver here because he's going to unsell to another guy. But it stops right there. If you sell it to a Yid, what do you call it? When you sell it to a guy, there's no lifnei lifnei. When you sell it to a yid, that's when you have lifnei lifnei because the yid has the isa lifnei ibir and you have isa lifnei ibir. So lifnei lifnei we don't do, but to a guy, there's no isa of lifnei. The guy himself has no isa of lifnei. So therefore, sorry. So a guy, there's only one lifnei. That's why it's us to sell to right. But to a yid where there's lifnei because the yid himself has an isa lifnei, then you have no problem there. Doesn't go on to you. Also, the Jewish rabbi weapons. Hey, what are we talking about? Either chassid the kaki the robber go kill people and shit. I know what's in the guy. If he's a robber and he's a murderer, he's a murderer. We either like cut, we don't kill. I might tackle loy. Was it loyal to like cut and kill? And we were talking about him. He's very slippery, and he robs people's houses. And worse comes to worse, so if he gets in trouble, gets caught, he will use it as a weapon. He's not a murderer, but he'll definitely use it to defend himself, and it's your weapon. So therefore, don't. And it's a possibility. It's a strong possibility. So therefore, don't sell. And this is a big case in America, whether the manufacturer of guns are liable if and they try a number of times in court. They should be liable because they sold the guns or the gun merchant to a guy who ended up murdering people in Land. Should that person be carrying responsibility? So the Gemara says, the Gemara said, don't sell it to people that are possible that you'll use it. He might use it sometimes to save himself. We learned, you should not sell them today in shield. But yes, some say you are allowed to because it's not a weapon, it's a protection. My time, why are you allowed to? Is the word those hold you're not allowed to. Why not? If it's because it protects these murderers, and even though you're helping out this guy, no, you some food. You're sustaining a murderer. If the problem is that's not a weapon that he can use to harm anybody, it's just protecting himself, then why let him sell him food? But that's not a question. It's impossible, no braided, as Rashi says, because it's an Ava. You sell food to everybody else, not to him. Kind of animosity it'll cause. Is Hachinami here too? The others say, we have a choice. You have no choice. But where you have a choice, don't sell him things that he can protect himself. The others say, tracing behind the time of the law. You know why you can't sell them these shields? Because sometimes it can be used as a weapon of war. The Chisholim is Zinaya, if he uses up all his weapons, let's say he uses up all his arrows, his bow and arrow, then cut the big value. It has sharp edges, he'll use that as a murder weapon. But yes, I mean, but those who say, you are allowed some of these defense weapons, because the Chisholim Zinaya, if he runs out of arrows, Ma'adik Arki, he thinks to hang around with a shield, he'll run away and try to fetch new weapons. Halacha ki you shouldn't sell them because they might use it as weapons. We'll stop over here. I think tomorrow makes actually let's go through two naps quickly. Rabbi said, you do not sell them ashoshias shel barzel, chunks of silver. You don't sell them chunks of silver. Why not? Because my time was the choshim and they'll keep on flattening it out, and they can make their own weapons. You're giving them the material to be able to make good weapons. Then you shouldn't sell anything, a shovel, a hoe. You shouldn't sell these things because they could turn them into weapons. We're talking about not stam metal here. The Parzullah Hindua from India, they had this special metal that's only used for weaponry. The other thing is some of them have other uses, permitted uses. So why are we going to be suspicious and maybe using for a weapon? But this Hinduan metal is such a material that's only used for weaponry. But so how can we sell to Goyim today? We sell it to the locals, to Parsoyim, because the Mignal they use this to protect us as well. That's the head of Israel selling all these weapons, keep stability in the world. Okay, we'll stop.